Welcome to Christian Answers. This is Pastor Jeff Short, and we are in part 3 of this discussion on the topic, centered on the topic of whether women should be prosecuted for doing an abortion, whether they should face jail time or some kind of a penalty or fine. And David Gordon on the left here is interviewing Kristen Day, who is the president of Democrats for Life. She's a pro-life Democrat, and she is trying to make the argument that the pro-life movement should not focus at all on or even attempt to prosecute women for having an abortion. And David Gordon is pushing back on that and saying, well, why not? Because the logic of justice would spell out that if you break the law, if you break a serious law, especially a law concerning taking of an innocent life, like abortion is, and if you live in a state that abortion is illegal and you go ahead and have an abortion, yes, you should face some criminal penalties. And that, to me, only seems logical. It only seems reasonable. It seems biblical. It just seems common sense that if you have a law on the books, you have to prosecute people who flaunt that law or disobey that law, and you have to penalize them in some way for disobeying the law. If you don't penalize disobedience to the law, then the whole legal structure of society collapses. It just means that people are going to look at the law and say, that's a joke. They don't even prosecute. They don't sentence. They don't put in jail or fine anyone who breaks the law, so I can just break the law with impunity. Well, that spells chaos for society. So we're going to continue on. This is part 3 of a 3-part series. I think we might be able to get through today. If not, we'll go for another episode. But I want to try to wrap up this discussion about prosecuting women who have abortions. It's not that we want to especially go after women who have an abortion. We just simply want to include these women for prosecution because they're doing something wrong, and they're doing something criminal, and they're doing something sinful and evil, actually, taking of an innocent human life. So I guess the main burden of proof would be on those who say we shouldn't prosecute someone for killing another person. Why shouldn't we? So that's what David Gordon is trying to push back on Kristen Day. And let's enter into that conversation and see what they're talking about. And I'll stop at a certain point and give commentary.
I think that kind of attitude might have more teeth when you're not just blaming the woman and prosecuting the women only. When you talk about the responsibility of the fathers, I think a lot of times it's the father who is pushing the woman toward abortion, or saying that I'll break up with you if you don't have an abortion, or I'll kick you out of the house if you don't have the abortion. And even the parents, we saw the woman, the mother who ordered the abortion pills online and gave them to her daughter. I mean, she has been prosecuted, which is a good thing. So I think we should be going after the people who are pressuring these women into abortion instead of providing support to protect that life.
Sure. Jail?
Well, I agree with her that they should go after people who had any connection with the act of abortion. And that's not the argument. That's not the point. And actually, that does support David Gordon's viewpoint. He's saying we should prosecute women who bring themselves and their baby into the abortion clinic to have that baby killed. We should prosecute them. And Kristen Day is saying, well, we need to look at the people also who are pressuring the woman to have an abortion or assisting the woman to have an abortion, which would mean the husband or the boyfriend or the parents or the family. And again, David Gordon and all the pro-life abolitionists would say, well, of course, yes, definitely. We should hold culpable anyone who's involved in aiding and abetting the crime of abortion. So why wouldn't we do that? I think that it just makes sense that you would, in fact, prosecute people who are involved in the sin of abortion. But again, that is not incompatible with this whole idea of prosecuting women for an abortion. that only includes more people who are guilty. That it simply is the argument that there are more people involved in the guilt of abortion than just the woman. I agree if Kristen Day is saying, well, it's not just the woman's fault. That's true. It's not just her fault. There's a whole group of people who are involved in this abortion mentality and even the abortion industry. Before this, Kristen Day was talking about we should hold and criminally prosecute organizations like Planned Parenthood who lie to women, who coerce women, who play on their fears and get them to have an abortion, maybe against their own better judgment. And again, that is not an incompatible argument with the Christian abolition movement saying that we should criminalize and penalize women who commit abortions. That is not incompatible. Yes, bring as many people who are guilty of aiding and abetting the woman in the killing of her child, bring them all in to court and begin to prosecute them to some degree. Of course, each one has a different degree of culpability. I would still want to underscore the fact that the woman is not being forced in the sense of a gun put to her head or held there on the abortion gurney like they do in China. For example, there are forced abortions in China that occur and have occurred in the past, especially during the one-child policy where the Chinese Communist government allowed for only one child per family in China as a way of cutting down the population growth. And many women were actually forced. They were taken bodily by police, brought to the abortion hospital, and held physically down or restrained on the table while an abortion was performed on them. That's a forced abortion. That is different from a woman who has all kinds of conflicting feelings and emotions inside of her, and in that sense, she's being forced into having an abortion by these voices that are speaking to her, whether family voices or her boyfriend or girlfriend or her husband voice, or all these people and society and pressures. That's different from actually physically being forced to have an abortion like they have in China. So the women in China who are actually physically constrained and restrained to have an abortion on the abortion gurney there in the doctor's office, that relieves the woman of any guilt or responsibility for that abortion because, of course, she couldn't get out of it. If the police come and grab you physically and take you to the abortion hospital, and then you're restrained in that hospital to the point where you can't get away, and then they perform an abortion on you, of course you're not guilty of the sin of that abortion. Of course it's not a crime. But that's not what's happening in the United States. And it's not even anything close to happening in the United States. I don't think at any point has that ever happened in the United States. So we're not talking about the same thing. And so when Kristen Day says, well, these women aren't having abortions willingly, that's just plain false. They are having abortions willingly, and we shouldn't kid ourselves into thinking anything different.
Lock them up.
Yep, I would agree. This is where we can agree.
Sure. Yeah, it's absolutely, you can't just urge someone to commit a murder. That doesn't work in the Western legal system. You are therefore an accessory to murder. But I feel like people are trying to take the moral high ground away from the purists on this side, and I don't like it. As I quoted in the opening read, Archbishop William Lori is trying to represent this almost as a Catholic, a Christian position. Oh, that we don't prosecute these women, and that's not pro-life. But let me read to you from the Catechism of the Catholic Church.
And she was...
People are misrepresenting somehow that it's unchristian, it's not pro-life to say prosecute these women. It's very Christian, and it's in the 92 Catechism.
Yeah, when you look at, I think there's another case in Texas right now that's being fought. There was a woman who worked in a prison. I don't know if you saw this, that she started to get contractions, and her employer would not let her leave. So she eventually made it to the hospital 2 hours later, and she was 7 months pregnant and delivered a stillborn. The doctor said if she would have been there sooner, they could have saved the baby. And now the Attorney General in Texas is saying that she sued, and the Attorney General of Texas is saying that the baby has no rights, and she has no right to file suit against her employer, which would be the government, for not letting her go save her baby. So I think we have to have a fuller discussion on being consistent. In that case, who should be prosecuted for the death of that baby? Should the state pay? And I think yes. I think the Attorney General is taking the wrong position on this case. They caused the death of her baby. They should be guilty.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, there are all kinds of extenuating circumstances, and no one is saying that this is going to be easy for the court systems to determine, for example, how guilty a woman is in each particular case when she goes to have an abortion. There are all going to be all kinds of legal challenges ahead. But what is the only alternative? The status quo right now, which basically means women, only one sex, can commit murder. A man cannot kill a child under any circumstances. A man cannot kill a 9-month-old child. A man cannot kill a 6-month-old child. A man cannot kill any child at any stage of development. So why should a woman be able to kill a child at 6 months or 5 months or 4 months or 3 months or 8 months or 9 months? Why should a woman be given a special right to kill when no other segment of society has that right? It just doesn't make any sense. Now, Kristen Day is going to argue that we should never, ever prosecute women. And what she's going to say continually is she's going to say that we don't want to throw women in jail. We never want to throw women in jail. We want to save babies' lives. Well, I agree that the priority in the pro-life movement should be to save women's lives. No question about it. The priority of the pro-life movement should be to save babies' lives. No question. But once you've gotten to the point where the law says that you can save children's lives, and you should save children's lives by doing whatever you can to keep them alive, and that you're not allowed to have an abortion, you're not allowed to kill your child. Okay, once you've gotten to that point, then obviously you cannot ignore the logical next question, which would be, okay, well, what happens if people break that law and they say, well, I'm going to go ahead and kill my child anyway. I'm going to go ahead and have an abortion anyway. I'm going to go ahead and murder my offspring in defiance of the law. So what do you do with people like that? That is a woman who goes in for an abortion when it's illegal to have an abortion. Now, the feminists will say, well, it's a natural human right to have an abortion, which is totally ridiculous. It's not a natural human right to be able to kill your offspring. I mean, it was at one point accepted, for example, in the Greco-Roman world, that parents could actually expose their children, which would mean if they had a child born that they didn't think would be healthy or fit, or they didn't like the child, or there was something wrong with the child that they objected to, they could just take the child out into the middle of the field or forest and just leave it, expose it. It's called exposing a child. And the child would just either die or be devoured by animals or would just simply perish out there alone. And that was acceptable in the Greco-Roman world. It was a cold, cruel, uncivilized world at that point. Well, we now know that that is barbaric, and we would never want to advocate anything like that. That would be totally a criminal, sinful, immoral act for any child to be exposed in today's world, and we can all agree on that. But there seems to be a blind spot in our society, in our secular world, that says, well, while we won't accept exposing children that we don't want after they're born, it's perfectly okay to kill children in the womb before they're born, and that's okay. Well, why is that okay? Again, feminists would say, well, women have to have bodily autonomy, or they have to be free to kill their child, or they're not truly free. But that we can all recognize that as some kind of hyper-exaggerated definition of freedom. Satan, for example, the former angel that fell and became a demon, Lucifer, his understanding of freedom means that he has to be able to be free to do whatever he wants to do and contradict God's laws and will and live totally by his own feelings and emotions and intellect. He needs to be able to do anything he wants to at any time with no accountability, and that's freedom for him. Again, a hyper-exaggerated understanding of freedom. And this is exactly what the feminists are saying with abortion, that women should be able to have an abortion at any point during the 9 months before birth, and that is totally their choice. That they don't have to consult with anyone other than their doctor. They don't have to talk to their husband or their boyfriend. There should be no joint decision policy where the husband has to sign off on it. It's totally the woman's responsibility. That's what feminism says. And we can see how wrong that is because, again, we're dealing with a human life in the womb. So women should not be given the right to kill babies in the womb just because they're the carrier of that baby. Just because you carry a baby does not give you the right to kill that baby. You are not the Lord over that baby. God Almighty is the Lord over that baby, and you don't have the right to take a life in the way that God Almighty would have that right because he's God Almighty. But Kristen Day now, this pro-life Democrat, she wants to argue, no, abortion is totally wrong, it's sinful, it's a crime, but the criminal who is responsible for the death of that baby through an abortion, the woman, who is, I would say, the primary mover and shaker of the death of that child. Because, again, while the direct agent of death is the abortion doctor, quote, abortionist, that's the direct agent, the woman brought herself and her baby to that primary agent of death to do the dirty deed. So if it weren't for the woman bringing herself and bringing her baby to the abortionist, the baby would live. Naturally speaking, the baby would live. So all she has to do is refrain from taking herself to the abortion clinic and the baby lives. But she didn't do that. So she took her baby and herself to the abortion clinic, and then the baby was killed by the abortionist. So if you're looking for a direct responsible party for the killing of that baby, yes, it is the abortionist because they're the ones that actually puts the knife in the child. But in the other sense, it's the woman who is the major player in the death of that child because she actually brought the two together. She brought the baby and the butcher together to have the baby killed. So, yeah, there is responsibility there. And so Kristen Day is not owning up to the responsibility of the woman. She is only thinking in terms of ending abortion through cutting off the supply of the means of abortion. So her thinking is, and a lot of the pro-life groups, is that if we can just simply dry up all of the means of aborting a baby, if we can dry up the abortion doctors, cut off that supply of abortion doctors, if we can cut off all of the facilities for abortion, cut off all the abortion hospitals, make that illegal for all hospitals, cut off all the abortion clinics, eliminate all these abortion clinics, have them shut down, make it illegal for any kind of medical establishment to perform abortions, and basically work on the supply side, just dry up the entire abortion industry, then women can't go anywhere to have an abortion. But again, that is sidestepping the issue that David Gordon is asking her, and that is, why is it wrong to hold a woman accountable for her responsibility in the death of this child? Why is that wrong? And it seems to be Kristen Day's answer is that, well, we're not even going to go in that direction. We're not even going to talk in those terms because that would only inflame and it would pour fuel on the fire of people who don't even want abortion illegal. And so, and she mentions in this interview that we need the swing vote. So in other words, okay, maybe the dyed-in-the-wool liberals, leftists, pro-abortionists, feminists will never be persuaded. She is saying that there is a large swing vote that can be persuaded to support some kind of anti-abortion law in some state, whether it's some of the blue states or what they call now purple states, which is sort of a swing state. It could be blue or red, Democratic or Republican in the voting in the elections. And so she says we need the swing vote, and if we talk about prosecuting women or throwing women in jail, that's her favorite phrase, throwing women in jail. She said we'll never get the votes to get these pro-life laws passed. Well, she's using emotionalism when she keeps talking about we don't want to throw women in jail. Better framing of that is we don't want to put women in jail, but if they commit murder or are responsible for the death of their offspring, for their child's death, yes, they deserve to go to jail, right? I mean, we don't want to throw children in jail. We don't want to throw teenagers in jail. If you're an 18-year-old, we don't want to throw you in jail, obviously. But if you do some kind of a crime, like kill someone, you are going to go in jail because that's what justice demands. So we don't go around saying, well, we don't want to throw teenagers in jail as an excuse for never, ever holding them legally responsible for whatever they do in society. No. If we did that, again, social chaos. So we're just basically probably arguing over, I believe at this point, we're arguing over priority of battle strategies. And I can understand the prioritizing of the stopping of the killing of children. That's what we want to prioritize. And I don't hear them talking about that, though. I mean, I think the discussion needs to hinge on the priorities. And I agree with Kristen Day that the priority is to stop abortion. And if we need to, in order to stop abortions, in other words, to stop children from being killed and to stop abortion clinics from operating and then stop abortion doctors from aborting and doing all of the things that are involved in this industry. The goal is to shut down that industry and to eliminate 99.9% of all abortions, or 100 if we could, but that's probably totally unrealistic. The goal is to do that. So if that's the goal, if the price that we pay to get that goal achieved is to put on hold the discussion of the prosecution of women, in other words, if we can actually have abortion ended, and we can do so through political action, and it's going to take more than that. It's actually going to take the supernatural power of God to speak to people's hearts, because we live in a hard-hearted secular world where the fear of God is very absent. And so it's going to take a miracle from God to actually see the end of abortion. But I guess Kristen Day is saying, look, the goal should be to end abortion. And then the second thing would be then to go back and administer justice. But if you have to choose, if you put justice first, in other words, prosecute the women, she's saying, well, that would scare off so many of the vital swing votes that we need and people in the middle that we need to actually end abortion, so that the end result, if we start talking about prosecuting women, the net result would be that we don't, one, have the end of abortion, and then obviously we wouldn't have the prosecution of women, because we wouldn't have anything. We would be going for the strict, correct position, and in the end actually have nothing to look at and say we accomplished something. So in reality, we have to prioritize. And so she's saying we need to prioritize the end of abortion to the extent we can do that. And if we could get rid of like 99% of abortions, that would be a great, miraculous victory. And would we be satisfied in getting rid of 99% of all the abortions, even if we never got around to the justice question of what to do with the women that do try to sneak around the law and have an abortion? I would say, I mean, even though I am an abolitionist, pro-life abolitionist, I believe that eventually we do have to prosecute women who try to sneak around the law. If we could end abortion and put off the whole question about what do we do with the women who have tried to sneak around the law, and they never get prosecuted. I mean, okay, women don't get prosecuted, but we end abortion. Isn't it an accomplishment in and of itself? So this discussion will go on, but I hope this has been informative, and we'll see you back next week. God bless.